Blockers and card removal seem to be the hot topic in poker right now, but are blockers and card removal overrated, especially at the micro stakes? Well, if you don't know, if you're interested in finding out if they are, if they aren't, stay tuned because that's what we're going to talk about today. Hey guys, welcome to today's video. If you guys don't know who I am, my name's Alton Harden. I'm the founder of MicroGrinder Poker School and our YouTube channel, and we're all about turning beginning and struggling poker players into solid winning poker players through solid poker fundamentals. So if you guys are new to our YouTube channel, consider hitting the subscribe button down there so you subscribe to all of our latest poker videos. And also, if you guys want a free copy of my Poker Fundamentals ebook, check out the link in the description below. And without further ado, let's go ahead and let's get into today's video. So for today's video, guys, I want to talk about blockers and card removal. So it seems like the concept of utilizing blockers and bluffing with blockers and card removal seems to be really prominent in the poker world today. You can't watch a video, you can't go to a poker forum, you can't read a book without modern theory talking about utilizing blockers and card removal. But my question is, how effective are blockers and card removal specifically at the micro stakes? So we're not going to talk about the higher stakes. We're not going to talk about people playing 10, 20 no limit. We're not going to talk about people playing 100NL through 500NL Zoom online. We're going to talk about 2NL, 4NL, 5NL, and 10NL. And really examine if blockers are effective or not. So I've been working on my book. A lot of you guys know that. I just finished my chapter on 3-bet bluffing, and I talked about using blocker cards to 3-bet bluff, and then I did a bit of an analytical dive to look to see how effective blockers are pre-flop. And so I kind of want to talk about that today. And so what we're going to do is we're going to jump on over to my screen, take a look at some of the stuff I put in my book, and we're going to talk about blockers, and we're going to consider how much of an opponent's range or perceived range that they can have left in terms of a calling range, how much it removes, and how effective they are. And then we're going to talk about some post-flop considerations as well and determine, are they really effective or are they not effective at the micro stakes? Because playing at the micro stakes versus the higher stakes is an entirely different game, entirely different type of opponents, entirely different skill level, entirely different type of a thinking mentality in terms of the players themselves. And so I think putting all that into consideration, it really should affect our strategy. So let's go ahead, let's jump on over to my screen and let's take a look at what I have. Alright guys, so we're looking at my manuscript for my latest book, and I want to talk about blockers and a bit about combinatorics. And when we're talking about blockers and card removal, essentially what it is, it's a hand where we block the likelihood of our opponent having a potential hand. So for example, if our opponent potentially has pocket aces, if we hold an ace, we can reduce the likelihood that they hold pocket aces. And that's really what blockers and card removal and combinatorics really comes down to. Now, we can utilize it pre-flop in terms of putting our opponent on a specific range and determining what they can and what they can't call with. And we can use it post-flop. For example, maybe we have the ace of diamonds and there's 3 diamonds on the board, and we want to bluff with the nut flush because we know our opponents can't have the nut flush with 2 diamonds. So we can use it to our advantage both pre-flop and post-flop. But the question is, how effective is it at the micro stakes? So looking at my book, I'm going to do a bit of a highlight here. So blocker hand is a hand that reduces the likelihood that our opponent has a hand that can profitably call a 3-bet or a 4-bet for value. Now, in general, when we're talking about blocker hands, so we're talking about 3-bet bluffing, and we're considering our opponent's 3-bet flatting range or their 4-betting range, we typically want to use a hand with an ace or a king in it because, let's face it, right? A lot of our opponents' hands where they can actually call a 3-bet profitably or they can 4-bet us for value, especially at the micro stakes. Remember, we're talking about the micro stakes, is going to have an ace or a king. Yes, they're going to have pocket jacks, pocket queens, and pocket tens, but a lot of their range is going to be composed of ace king, ace queen, ace jack, pocket aces, pocket kings, hands like that. So when we're talking about blockers, we're mainly talking about suited ace-x hands and suited king-x hands, and we like suited hands versus unsuited because they can make flush draws and flushes versus an unsuited hand can't. But without getting into all that stuff, let's kind of take a bit of a deeper dive. So if we take, for example, let's talk about starting hand combinations. So for any pocket pair, there's a total of 6 combinations. So if you have pocket aces, you can be dealt pocket aces 6 different ways, and I have that shown down here. So 6 different ways that you can be dealt pocket aces is shown right here. For any non-pair cards, a hand like ace king, ace queen, king queen, for example, I have down here, there's a total of 6 combinations or 16 ways that you can be dealt that hand. So for king queen suited, you can be dealt king queen suited of clubs, spades, diamonds, or hearts. And for king queen offsuit, you can be dealt that 12 different ways. Now there's a way that we can easily do the math and determine these, but I'm not going to get into all that today. I just want to talk about how effective blockers are at reducing the likelihood of our opponents potentially calling us. And we're going to look at pre-flop because in terms of what I have written in my book, we are talking about pre-flop specifically. We're talking about 3-bet bluffing and seeing what type of a range they can continue with, or what they can continue with. And then we'll just simply talk about post-flop and talk about player types and really the likelihood of a blocker utilizing a blocker, whether it's going to be effective or not. So if we take, for example, let's say that we hold a king x hand, and specifically let's say that we hold the king of spades, and we decide to 3-bet bluff with that hand. Let's just say, for example, just out of the air, let's say we decide to do king 7 of spades. Let's look at how that affects the total combinations of our opponent having pocket kings and king queen, both suited and offsuit. How many combinations of those hands does it reduce? So for example, right, they start with a total of 6 combinations of pocket pairs and 16 combos of the non-pocket pairs of the hand. So for example, there's going to be 6 combos starting at pocket kings and 16 combos of king queen suited, and king queen offsuit. So if we hold a king of spades, we reduce half the combinations of the pocket pairs of kings. So that's a 50% reduction. In terms of king queen suited, we reduce one of them because we reduce king queen suited to spades. Since we hold the spades, they can't have that. So we reduce that from 4 to 3. And then for king queen offsuit, we reduce it. We take away 3 different combos, so we reduce that from 12 down to 9. And so those 22 starting combinations, potentials of pocket kings and king queen, go down to 15. Now this is an example. This is not a realistic example of somebody's 3-bet flatting range or their 4-betting range. And typically what I'll just call this is a 3-bet continuing range. So what will happen is somebody open raises and we decide to 3-bet bluff. They're either going to continue in the hand or not continue. And by continuing, they're either going to call our 3-bet or they're going to 4-bet us. And so we're looking at continuing. And so this is not really a realistic example, but what this shows us with just this very simple example is that we reduce this down to from 100% of that range. Now we're down to 68% of that range. So 1 minus 0.68 gives us roughly a 1/3 reduction in their range. Now let's take this a bit further and let's take a look at some realistic situations. Because I want to look at realistic situations in terms of, and let me go ahead and make this a little larger so you can see this. Let's do a realistic situation and let's see how much of our opponent's 3-bet continuing range we actually reduce pre-flop. So for example, let's assume that we hold ace 2 suited of spades and we are facing an open from the button and we're in the blind. And we decide to 3-bet bluff our ace 2 suited rather than fold or call. So the question is, if we decide to 3-bet this hand versus an opponent's wide open buttoning range, and let's assume that they only have a 3-bet continuing range where they're either going to flat or they're going to 4-bet us, is with pocket aces, pocket kings, ace king, and ace queen. This is just an example. The question is, how many combinations do we reduce of those simply by having ace deuce suited of spades? Well, by looking at this, we reduce pocket aces by 50%. We don't block any kings, so we don't reduce that. Ace king, we reduce that from 16 down to 12. Ace queen, we reduced that from 16 down to 12. So there were initially a total of 44 combinations of pocket aces, pocket kings, ace king, and ace queen. We reduce it down to 33. And so out of that total amount of 44, 33 now remain. And so 75% of those original combinations remain. And so we effectively reduce it by only 25%. And this is a fairly tight continuing range. But if we're looking at the micro stakes, if we're looking at 2NL and 4NL, people play fairly straightforward in 3-bet pots. They're not going to get out of control unless you start facing better players and you start moving up away from 2NL, 4NL, 5NL. Once you get to 10NL and above, or if you're playing a Zoom, you're playing tougher games, people are going to be polarized. They are going to be 3-betting and continuing light in 3-bet pots. But we're looking at fairly straightforward opponents, and with a straightforward opponent that's going to be continuing with a really tight range, in terms of this portion of his range, we're only reducing 25% of it. Now, what if we expand the range? Let's expand the range a little more. So let's include pocket queens, let's include pocket jacks, and we could include hands like ace jack suited, ace 10 suited as well, or ace jack. And that would actually expand out his range more. But let's just generally look at the effect where our opponent's range expands in terms of their 3-bet continuing range. So in terms of how much we don't block anything from kings, anything from pocket queens, anything from pocket jacks. We do block the aces, ace king, ace queen. So there were 56 combos, 45 still remained. So now 80% of that original 100% of this range still remains, so we only have a reduction of 20%. Now if we expanded this further, we would find that the effectiveness of our blockers decrease. So what this tells us is that the tighter our opponent's continuing range, the more effective blockers are. The wider their continuing range, the less effective they are. So if we put ace jack in here, this would reduce the effectiveness. If we put ace 10 in here, if we put pocket 10s, maybe we put king queen suited in here, again, it would just reduce the effectiveness of our blocker pre-flop. So what I'm getting at here, and hopefully you're seeing this, is that even with these fairly conservative ranges here at the micro stakes, and let me see if I can get this so it's a little smaller, but it's on one page. I can't get it, so it's on one page. That's all right. Let's make this a little smaller. So what I'm getting at here is that even with these fairly conservative 3-bet continuing ranges, using a blocker hand as a 3-bet bluff doesn't remove that much of their entire continuing range. Now, when we're 3-bet bluffing, we're not really concerned with our opponent's entire opening range. We're only concerned with the portion that's their continuing range and how much of that range we eliminate. And really, we don't eliminate that much, right? You may say, oh, this is a great 3-bet bluffing hand because I have an ace X suited. Well, you need to consider how wide their range is and how often they're folding with 3-bets, and also what their 4-betting range is. So we need to look at their 3-bet flatting range, their 4-betting range as well, and how often they fold to 3-bets. Because it's not just a matter of just saying, I have a good blocker hand, so I'm going to 3-bet bluff here. Because if we look at this, I mean, even with just this very conservative range, there's still 33 combinations remaining of that original 44. So we're really not eliminating that much. I mean, in a very, very conservative and very optimistic situation, we're only eliminating 25% of that range. So let's now look at post-flop. And I don't have anything in my book yet because I haven't gotten to post-flop, but let's talk about some basic scenarios. So let's say that you have the ace blocker to the nut flush in a 2NL game or 4NL game, and you decide to, on maybe a three card flush board, you decide to bluff raise. The question is, how often are your opponents folding king high or lower flushes at 2NL, 4NL, and 5NL? Are people actually folding non-nutted flushes at the micro stakes? The answer is no. So utilizing blockers and card removals for flushes at the micro stakes really isn't that effective. Now on a 4-card flush board, they're going to be more effective, but I still think people are going to call with the second nut flush and maybe the third nut flush, especially if they're bad, which is a majority of our opponents. So just taking that into consideration and really thinking about the likelihood of our opponents not folding a non-nutted flush. Looking at that and assuming that people are going to call with a lot of lower flushes, even with maybe 100 big blinds or 200 big blinds deep, tells me that utilizing blockers and utilizing card removal is not really that effective at the micro stakes. But as we move up in stakes, and money means a lot more, the amount of money on the table and the skill level of our opponents increases as well, tells me that they're going to be a bit more effective. But pre-flop, they're probably not going to be as effective, because as you improve, as you move up in stakes, everybody else is going to know how much of a percentage of that entire range these blockers actually remove. And there's a lot of hands, and they know that you're 3-betting polarized, so they're going to be calling with a wider range. They're not going to be playing straightforward. So the metagame dynamics change a lot. So while they may be a bit more effective as you move up against weaker regulars, they probably aren't going to be that effective unless we get post-flop and playing fairly deep. But the micro stakes in general, just by doing this analysis myself for my book, it made me think about this, and it made me really want to do this video and get you guys to think about this, rather than just blindlessly looking at, okay, I have ace-7 suited, or I have king-5 suited, and I'm going to 3-bet bluff it versus late position open because I block them having a king or an ace. Well, knowing how much of their range you block is very important. And then post-flop as well, asking yourself, do people actually fold non-nutted flush hands? Just because you hold a blocker to the nut flush doesn't mean they're going to fold. Maybe if you're 500 big blinds deep, they'll fold, but not 100 big blinds, not 150 big blinds, not 200 big blinds. People typically aren't folding. So my conclusion here, and I may be wrong in regards to some of this, but my conclusion based upon what I'm seeing here with this analysis and playing myself is that I don't think blockers are that effective at the micro stakes, and especially combining that with the cost of rake, with rake being much higher at the micro stakes, is that you should be a lot more conservative with your 3-bet bluffing and utilizing blockers and utilizing card removal both pre-flop and post-flop. So that's my conclusion. What do you guys think? What's your analysis? What have you guys seen? And what do you guys really consider when you're utilizing blockers, and how effective have they been for you? And did you guys actually know what percentage of the actual combinations actually removed? Did you guys know that as a range expands that they're less effective, and that even with a conservative range like this that it only removes 25%? Because I think people think that they remove a lot more of the entire range than they do. So let me know what you think. Put your comments down below. And if you guys like today's video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please hit that subscribe button. And if you guys like all this free, awesome poker content that I put out for you guys on a regular basis, please check out my Patreon link down below, because any support that I can get from you guys helps me out with continuing offering these free videos for you guys on YouTube. And if you guys know any other poker players, any family members, any friends, anybody else that might get some value out of my videos, tell them to check out my videos, my YouTube channel, and subscribe as well. And thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys got a lot out of this video, and see you guys at the next video in about a week. So take care.